Hello! Welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. We're continuing the ongoing story of Myra and the online school for adventuring. If you're just joining us for the first time, I recommend you back up all the way to the beginning of Season 5 so that you know what's going on. In tonight's story, Myra and her friends are tasked with returning their borrowed objects. Will they succeed? Or will they discover that unborrowing is the hardest part?
As they headed out of the sneaker building, with their bags full of purloined goods, the three friends exchanged looks. "So," said Antoine, "when are you going?" "I'm going right now," said Myra. "I'm just going to walk into the library and put this back on the shelf." "Uh-huh," said Antoine. "Has it crossed your mind that if the librarian knew when you were in the library and had touched a book you weren't supposed to touch, that she's going to know the instant you walk back in?" "Of course it didn't," said Myra. Yeah. So you got any suggestions?" No," said Antoine. "Do you have any suggestions for how I give these cinnamon rolls back to Cook?" "Well," said Myra, "what I would do would be just go into the cafeteria for lunch and put the tray on the buffet." Said Antoine. "I'm not sure that's the same thing as giving them back exactly." "They were going to get put on the buffet anyway," said Myra. "I'm pretty sure." "But will Cook know?" "Oh, believe me," said Myra. "Cook will know." Antoine sighed. They both turned and looked at Chelsea, who was scanning the lowering clouds in the sky. "Don't look at me," she said. "All I have to do is scale the exterior of a building at what looks like rain and dark, so..." "Yeah," said Myra. "We're jealous." "Cheers," said Chelsea, and walked off in the direction of the dorm. Myra and Antoine exchanged glances. "You want to trade?" Myra asked. "I don't think we're allowed to," said Antoine. "You're probably right," said Myra. "Well, you want to come with?" "Sure," said Antoine. "It's not really lunchtime yet, and I'd rather go when it's busier." "If you go when it's busier," said Myra, "everybody's going to see you put them back." "Good point," said Antoine. "Okay, fine. You come with me to the cafeteria, and then I'll come with you to the library." "Deal," said Myra. So they headed in the direction of the cafeteria. "What I need," said Antoine as they approached the cafeteria, "is a distraction." "Oh no," said Myra. Antoine turned and looked at her, hands on his hips. "What you need," he said, "is also a distraction." Said Myra. "When you put it that way." And so Myra walked around to the back of the cafeteria, counted silently to herself to 50, and then knocked loudly on the kitchen door, taking a deep breath. She knew Cook was not in a good mood, and she wasn't really sure. The door jerked open. "What?" said Cook. "Hello, Cook," said Myra. "Do you have any dishes you need washed?" "I didn't ask you to come wash dishes," said Cook. "I'm in a bad mood." "Really?" said Myra. "Anything I can do to help?" "Not unless you can tell me who took my cinnamon rolls last night." "Oh," said Myra. "That's terrible." Cook squinted her one big eye at Myra. "Did you take them?" she said. "Don't lie to me. I'll know." "I swear upon my honor," said Myra, "that I did not take your cinnamon rolls last night." "Good," said Cook. "Then get away." And she slammed the door in Myra's face. "Whew," said Myra, walking back around to the front of the cafeteria. "That went well." She waited outside. Antoine seemed to be taking an awfully long time to return. She waited some more, and then she decided to go in the front. She stopped as soon as she got in there. The administrator and a number of faculty members were sitting around tables, apparently having a little pre-lunch faculty meeting. Antoine was standing near the buffet, looking awkward. He smiled at her as she walked in and also froze. A couple of the faculty members glanced over. Antoine raised his eyebrows expectantly. Myra thought, this is not fair. I already provided a distraction. 2 distractions was not the deal. She sighed. He really was stuck, though. And if Cook came out of that kitchen, she was going to know that it was Antoine, and probably also connect that it was Myra who had been playing decoy. And so she walked 2 steps into the cafeteria and then pretended to trip over a chair leg and went sprawling with a loud oof. And everyone looked up and over at her, and she sat up and grabbed her foot and went as loudly as she could, "Ow, my toe!" And they all stared at her for a second, and then she said, "I'm sorry. I'm sure it'll be fine." And then the faculty members looked away from her, and she heard one of them mutter to another one, "Isn't that one of the sneaker students?" Myra's face flushed, but she was pleased to see that Antoine was walking back across the cafeteria toward her, and the cinnamon rolls were firmly in place on the buffet. They slipped out of the cafeteria just as they heard the administrator say, "Ooh, Cook brought out some cinnamon rolls. I didn't even notice." Said Myra, at the same time as Antoine was also breathing a sigh of relief. "You," she said, turning and poking a finger into his chest, "owe me." "Yes," said Antoine. "I will not argue with that. I do owe you, and I'm going to pay you back right now. Let's go." And so they headed over to the library. As they walked towards the library, Myra suddenly stopped. "Antoine," she said. "Yeah," he said. "Look at the library," she said. He looked. Standing there at the front door, looking directly at them, was the librarian. "So," said Antoine, "what now?" "Now," said Myra, "now we bluff." She said, "Okay, we're going to be out of her sight for just a second, and when we are, here's the plan." They finished walking up the front steps and walked to a different set of doors other than the one the librarian was standing at, and walked through, doing their best to appear completely nonchalant and not even notice that she was there. They had gotten about 3 steps in when Myra felt a hand on her shoulder. "A word with you, please, sneaker student," Myra heard in the librarian's clipped tones. "Oh, of course," said Myra. I'll catch up to you later, Antoine." Antoine just nodded and headed on into the library, looking concerned. Myra followed the librarian through the stacks and back to a small office. The librarian gestured her to a seat. Myra idly wondered whether there was a cot concealed in the wall somewhere here, and whether this is where the librarian stayed when she was not out walking the floors of the library. "I have a problem," said the librarian. "Oh," said Myra, "I'm sorry to hear that." "Last night, a student broke into the library and removed a book that is not allowed to leave the library. I want you to understand that I take this very seriously." "Of course you do," said Myra. "How can I help?" "This student moved much like you," said the librarian, "and was about your height, and was carrying a bag just like the one you have over your shoulder there. And so I must ask you to show me what is in your bag." "Oh," said Myra, "are you sure you didn't just overlook the book? Sometimes somebody forgets and puts it back in the wrong spot." I am quite sure I would notice immediately if one of my most important books was in the wrong spot, said the librarian, clearly more offended by this idea than by the idea that someone would steal one of her books. Now, again, before I permit you to leave this office, you must show me what is in your bag. Well, said Myra, okay. She slung Antoine's bag off her shoulder and handed it over to the librarian, who opened it up. There's nothing in here, she said, and then she sniffed. Why does your bag smell like cinnamon rolls? She said. Oh, said Myra, well, have you ever had one of Cook's cinnamon rolls? No, said the librarian. I have heard of them, but I have never enjoyed one myself. Wow, said Myra. I think you might be the only person on the whole campus who has never had one of Cook's cinnamon rolls. Said the librarian. Well, perhaps you will bring me one day. Maybe I will, said Myra. Absolutely, I could do that. So, I hope you find your book, and I'm sorry I couldn't help. But, yeah. Suddenly the librarian sat up straight. Wait, she said. The book is back where it belongs. Myra didn't know what to say to that. She wanted very much to say, how do you know? But something told her that she was going to get a very non-helpful answer, so she just said, Great, I'm very happy. I have some studying to do. Can I go now? Yes, said the librarian. You may go. What was your friend's name who came in with you? Oh, said Myra, that was just Antoine. Said the librarian. You may go. And Myra stood up, and as her hand touched the handle of the door, the librarian said, And Myra? Yes, said Myra. Never break into my library again. I would never dream of breaking into your library again, said Myra. The once was enough. More than enough, really. Well, said the librarian, I'm glad we agree about that. And Myra headed out of the librarian's office. She met Antoine in the stacks, and then, after feigning a few minutes of study, they left to head back to their dorm to regale Chelsea and Tweety with their adventure. That is the end for tonight.
Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's show, but questions and commentary were supplied by my children. The theme music was written by Brandon Thompson, and our wonderful logo was designed by Silas Wendelin. If you're enjoying the show, please tell someone about it, and leave a review with your podcast provider. You can now subscribe to the show to get extra stories and longer chapters of Myra and the Online School that combine multiple segments into a longer episode. The show's website is storiesforwonderfulchildren.buzzsprout.com. Until next time, I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.